Welcome back to another Over the Board Tournament game review series. This is round one of the Bob Brookings Swiss. This is a 7-round Swiss put on by the Melbourne Chess Club. It has a 75-minute plus 30-second increment time control, so a little bit quicker than our traditional 90-30, and it is FIDE rated. In this round one, I was playing the black pieces against a 1596 rated opponent, who I have played before in the past. They open with d4, play knight f6, they play knight c3, and d5 by us. And here, I know from previous experience, my opponent didn't play Jabava London last time. This bishop f4. They don't play the Verisov Viva with bishop g5. They have this fusion of this setup with h3, and I played c5, going for immediate counterplay in the center, as I do against both the London and the Jabava London. And opponent plays e3. So they're set up here with this pawn chain, set up just like the Collie system, with the addition of this h3 move and the knight on c3 instead of on f3. So a bit of a hybrid between these different openings. Again, not the Jabava London with the bishop out of the pawn chain or the Verisov attack, and not the traditional Collie with the knight on f3, but the knight on c3 instead. A bit of a hybrid setup from my opponent. Again, we're just going for immediate counterplay. Here, develop knight c6. Opponent plays a3. Again, this sort of hybrid setup, stopping any hops to the center, any bishop attacks early. We just develop bishop f5, not preferred by the computer. Computer wants e6. Develop our own pawn chain, but we're going to do this anyway in the future. So I thought, yeah, get the bishop out of the pawn chain and don't let it lock down like I did last Collie system I played against. Opponent went for the Zukertort variation of that with the bishop coming out to b2, and I did play the immediate e6 and got my bishop stuck for a long time inside the pawn chain. Had to develop by fianchettoing, so I just wanted to get the bishop out, even though it's not preferred by the computer. Opponent goes for the immediate bishop b5, putting pressure onto this pinned knight. Here, thought about the immediate attack and perhaps invoking the take, taking back, getting our double pawns. Did also consider just the immediate e6, just ignoring the threat, and consider both the queen moves, queen c7 and queen b6. Opted for queen b6. Thought this was the only way to defend the knight. Takes here, I can take back with the queen. This often happens in these Jabava London lines and the traditional London lines, where I often play queen b6, allowed by the immediate c5 push. So I thought this was not a terrible home for the queen. Computer says it's a fine move, so I went with that in the end. Now opponent plays knight f3. Computer saying immediate g4, just going for this bishop that's been developed early, already supported by the pawn on h3. Is a line that happens in the Jabava London too a lot earlier though, against the a6 setups with e3 included, but here the pawn bishop is already sitting out for the pawn to attack, which can also happen in these lines. The Jabava, when opponent does bring the bishop out to f5 immediately, can also lead to this pawn storm, which I do also play as white. Play e6. We're going to drop back to g6 if we're ever attacked. Here, opponent hops the knight in straight away, trying to put pressure onto our knight that is sitting on c6, which is pinned to our king. We've already got two defenders, so yes, we're going to end up with this pawn being doubled, but it was possible out of the opening anyway. This pawn was going to get doubled. Gives us the open, semi-open B file. And this reinforces the center. A strong light square bind on the strong light square pawn chain. So not terribly opposed to this outcome, and we can always push or take in the future if needed with the pawn that's already sitting on c5. So with that in mind, developed bishop d6, trying to finish up development and just get castled as soon as possible. Opponent does go for this taking with the bishop initially. Bishop takes on c6. Slightly preferred by the computer is knight takes. Even just castling. Perhaps preferred by the computer, but yeah, opponent goes for the bishop takes and was happy to get the bishop pair. This dark squared bishop seems inopportune. Not an optimal piece. It's going to get stuck behind this pawn chain and doesn't have strong development to the fianchettoed side on b2 either. So yeah, I was totally happy to get rid of the light squared bishop, considering all these dark squared pawns, locking in opponent's dark squared bishop. Opponent now gets the knight out of danger. Again, computer just wants to castle. It's not a terrible piece, but I guess opponent didn't want us to take with the bishop and ruin their pawn structure, or perhaps even take first, take, and then take. Yeah, but again, potentially ruining the pawn structure, so they just get the knight out of the way on e5. And we finish up development with castle. This point I was feeling good about the position. I thought I had got everything out of the opening that I had wanted. We've got strong development with all the pieces. We've castled nice and early, right on move 10. We've got strong bind of these pawns on the light squares, the f7, e6, and d5 squares, plus an addition on c6 just to reinforce the situation. Plus we've got this nagging pressure always towards the center. Again, working on with coach, not taking towards the center necessarily too early. Just leaving the tension here. Trying to find the opportune time to play that, which I do need to continue to review as well. Opponent castles, and we've got ourselves a game here. At this point, lots could be done on the board here. Yeah, pretty quickly played a waiting move. Could have definitely pushed the situation already now by taking, trying to ruin white's pawn structure perhaps, if pawn takes back, but opponent can take back with the knight here, and then our light squared bishop will have to drop back perhaps, which didn't feel necessarily optimum after here. Computer definitely thinks the pawn taking is the best. Here, dropping the bishop back, at least gets the bishop out of the way, and computer say this is quite a strong setup for black. The bishop's going to have nagging pressure across the board at all times onto the c2 pawn, which is trapped in by the knight. Knight perhaps now needs to get back out of the way, or perhaps the other knight, or knight f3, b3 possible, try and fianchetto. But yeah, computer much prefers black here already. So pawn would have taken, and then now the computer saying waiting moves, perhaps h6, just bringing the bishop back to b6, knight d7 even, bringing the knight out of the way for some reason. Knight fc8, Sicilian move. All possible. Here I was looking for the correct waiting move and just decided on rook ab8, trying to get this rook to the semi-open file, which was a plan all along if we were going to double these pawns. Perhaps even the f knight would have been perhaps long-term more pressure coming down the queen side, but wanted to do this with the a rook, felt more natural. Either way, computer saying, yeah, taking the center. Opponent has now has time to hop the knight out to a4. I wasn't necessarily, did see this move as a possibility, but didn't feel overly scared about it. There's developing moves to the queen, or escaping moves to the queen as well. Got the pressure if this pawn ever runs, this bishop ever goes to d2. So lots of possibilities of how we could continue the pressure on the queen side. Knight out on the rim didn't feel ideal, although it's putting pressure back towards the c5 pawn. So we do need to keep control of that c5 pawn with either queen b5 or a5. Dropping back is going to drop that pawn. So it decided on queen a5. Couldn't see a whole lot different or preferable about these moves. Did think though this might lead to queen b5 might lead to the immediate d4 c4 push initially, but we do have always the pawn taking here, so yeah, probably shouldn't be scared about that. But yeah, it felt like she was more out of the way on the edge of the board here. Computer's already saying to take, and then bishop takes, and then after pawn takes, pick back, and yeah, black's still in good stead here. So yeah, definitely felt like this was on the cards from our opponent. Gives away a center pawn for the b pawn, but at least gets rid of their inactive knight. Opponent didn't go for this after we played queen a5. They went for c3, just trying to reinforce, as you do in the London, reinforce this pawn chain, although there is no bishop sitting on bishop d3. It's definitely not as opportune. Here, this c4 did cross my mind, just shutting down the entire queen side. Positionally, it did feel like it made sense, although then never have the opportunity for this pawn break in the center, so I wasn't sure who that favored. Computer says it just absolutely favors black's position to just lock this down and just have this light squared bind. Importantly too, this just locks pretty much all the pawns. Here, b4 is the only real break. Possible for en passant in that situation too. So yes, he takes. Definitely not optimum. And this pawn is seems like it's a lot of trouble for black. So yeah, already here, white's in a lot of trouble. So yeah, c3. If we had found c4 would have been good in that regard, but yeah, we played knight e4 instead. Did think this was a good way to both develop, put some pressure towards the king side, and also try and defend this pawn that's sitting on c5. Now I felt like if pawn takes, we could take either way with the knight or the bishop, and would be holding strong. Did see that this move was coming, b4 too, but was fine with c takes, and then after a takes, at least the queen is defending, and the rook defends now too. This knight, but it felt like the knight really wasn't getting back into the game all that quickly, and even sitting on c5, although outposted, felt like we still had the ability to take if we needed, with our knight now sitting on e4, a very strong position for our knight. Backed up here, wanting to make sure we're not getting hit by any discoveries, which would be super annoying against the rook, discovering our queen if the knight was to move. So yeah, just getting the queen out of the way. But it finally gets the bishop off its starting square to b2. But again, this seems pretty miserable, this bishop sitting behind all these dark red pawns. Here I swung the queen back towards the king side. Here I was already calculating the retreating move, knight coming back to g5, trying to trade off this good defender of the knight sitting on f3. Here it seemed like I had all the play on the king side here, with these two bishops already staring into the position, thinking that if I could swing my queen, was going to be a lot of pressure. Perhaps ideas, if the queen was to be able to land on g5, if the knight was to take, I felt like I had a lot of pressure built in, possible ideas of taking on h3. Queen e2, opponent still trying to just untangle and finish up their development. They have a potential jump to come all the way in, but yeah, not scared of that. We're transferring our pieces all the way over to the other side of the board now, a lot quicker. But here did go for this idea, knight g5 with the computer's blessing. Was happy to find this move. I thought like it was quite a strong attack brewing. Knight e5 played by the opponent. Surprisingly to me, the knight takes on g5 is perhaps one of the best moves for white. But I thought after queen takes here, wasn't 100% sure how this was being defended, whether by f4 does potentially shut things down. King h1 also potentially shuts things down, but yeah, we just feel like we have quite a good pressure here. f4, queen g6, perhaps just dropping back, queen h6. Keep trying to keep this niggling pressure. Here, this tactic still exists of taking on h3, so got to be very careful. Opponent does now have queen f3, so they can build the fortress here and just hold steady. But again, these pieces feel like they're not really contributing. Here, it's going to be a slow game. Obviously, going to have to still build up this attack, but yeah, would have felt good about this position. Opponent, again, doesn't go for that. Goes for knight e5, which I thought was annoying because it cuts off the connection of the dark squared bishop. But did take my first quite considerable think in the game now. Trying to calculate, does the knight sack work on knight takes on h3? Or did I need to initially take the bishop, take the knight with the bishop sitting on e5? So here I was struggling to calculate after knight takes, and here if the pawn takes. Didn't think I had the immediate knockout blow, so couldn't see if bishop takes on h3. There was the immediate f4 stopping our queen from coming, and then if there was the immediate queen check, obviously the queen can't block because we have the bishop. But after king h1, felt like we were running out of a bit of this attack, so I saw bishop takes maybe on bishop takes on h3 as an idea. Computer is also saying queen h6 here, or even f6, kicking out the knight, as both quite substantial ideas. But again, here was also worried about possibly the rook coming to g1. Queen h4 best here, trying to set up the discovery. Here also f4 also works straight away. We can take and then threaten to take the queen, so opponent would take back with the rook or the queen. Then we'd have to get our queen out of the way. Maybe even rook takes here. Queen h6 check. Maybe even blocking with the queen, or king g2. Both fine for black. Both fine for white, sorry. So yeah, couldn't see this all the way through. Again, computer does give knight h3 a brilliant move. But yeah, having to see after takes and then queen, I couldn't calculate this through, and obviously playing against someone who's 150 plus points higher rated, sacrificing a whole knight in that situation does feel daunting. We go for something similar though. First we take with the bishop, which is perfectly fine moves. Black still holds advantage here. And after d takes, I thought at least now there's one less defender of the position, and the pawn structure is slightly disturbed. And now went for this knight takes on h3, which is not accurate, but still holds advantage for black. So this check here, they take back g takes, h3. Now we have the bishop takes, and now we do have the threat of bringing in the queen. So queen h5, best move from our opponent, letting this rook perish, because there is going to be compensation. Obviously now after king takes, black has the two rooks, but white has the two pieces for the rook. There's still significant compensation though, because white only has these 5 pawns, whereas black has 7 still on the board. So we do get two pawns for the rook, and the 2 minor pieces. So yeah, was compensation taken from shattering the king side, but yeah, did not see just how powerful Queen h5 was shutting down the entire initiative. Now we kind of have to grind a little bit more from this position, although there is some dynamics in the position. Here, trying to find the next continuation, was happy also to find f6. Again, nervous that it was weakening my position, but it did feel natural to try and clear the way for the rook. Knight c5 incoming to finally outpost this knight, but just continue with taking on e5, which the computer deems the only really good move in the position. Queen takes here, and here I do need to calculate that this e6 pawn is under significant pressure. Can't rush and try and go for checkmate straight away because it's not gonna hold. Here, if we were to play queen straight away to f7, this queen can take straight away, and now we can't deliver checkmate, although we'd love to, because we're going to get this discovery against our king. So this queen is pinned. We have to take and allow the knight to take, and actually white is doing better here after winning this pawn. So that doesn't work. Luckily did pause here and find rook b to e8, reinforcing and now allowing our queen to move, because the rook is now the defender. Rook a6 played by our opponent, and here the first and really only significant blunder that our opponent makes. Unfortunately didn't find the full continuation of how to exploit this. Just like round 7 of last tournament, I did find the start of how to exploit the advantage here. So queen h4, given a great move as well. Threatening to checkmate our opponent here. So our opponent really does have to fend against this threat. But importantly as well, this allows the queen to also swing across the other side of the board, which is going to be significant after knight d3, which does stop the checkmate from incoming. f4 slightly more accurate though. But here would have been absolutely clutch if we had have found, which we didn't unfortunately, but if we had have found the absolutely destructive fork of the knight and the rook. Queen c4 here. Very strong move against the rook and the knight. Here, rook takes is the continuation. We can't get too stressed about this straight away because we're the one that has the first check. But here we would have picked up the absolute exchange. So here we would have had the bishop for the rook and an extra pawn. So here we would have been right on top of the game, even though opponent does have the ability to threaten our queen straight away, our king with a possible checkmate of our own. We do have a chance to run. So here, opponent possibly king g2, probably best move. And then we do have queen comes back, checking the king again. The king's going to have to either go back to f1 or block with the queen. Either way, we've successfully defended against this checkmate threat. Opponent, would have tried to maybe continue with the checkmating ideas, but we do have now possible sacrifice of the rook in the position and so on. So it would have been clutch to find this. The other strong move that, again, need these nerves of steel. Finding rook takes on f2 would have also been winning quite significantly here. We'd have had to have found knight f2 going back and then rook f8. And here, with even just the 2 pieces left on the board against opponent's 4 pieces, we have to find here that queen f4 is the strongest way to try and stave off this attack, giving up the queen. Here, rook takes, rook takes. E takes here, and then we can continue and take. And now it's the queen versus the 3 pieces. Game is still in the balance, but yeah, we do have a significant pressure here incoming. Queen is potentially going to be stronger against these three pieces. Would feel, yeah, pretty good against this, but yeah, didn't see the continuation after the rook sack. Did feel very, very risky here. King's gonna be in a lot of trouble if the king tries to run. King e1 isn't going to work. King g1 might be able to sustain some pressure, but yeah, doesn't feel great. Here, perhaps even getting the rook out of the way. This queen h2 doesn't work, unfortunately, because of the white's queen defending. So yeah, position would have continued on here. Rook d2 apparently best move. Putting pressure onto the rook here. And again, computers are saying you have to sacrifice the house. Queen takes on g7 or even queen f4. The only way to really stop the infiltration of our other rook perhaps, and going on to checkmate our opponent. So yeah, wild position here. Definitely things are going to look over with coach about how to think and calculate these through. Yeah, definitely more game practice to be had. This is probably, work for the future towards jumping from this 1400 rating to this 1500 and beyond. And perhaps this is even more, then maybe this is, 17, 18, 1900 plus, but still, if we want to get there, we got to be able to find these clutch moves and find these sacrifices and find these tactics. Yeah, all things that need to be considered for the future. Fortunately, we play queen h1 here, and the advantage is all but gone now. Here, opponent is able to run with the king, and even though we have these two checks, that's it for the checks. The king runs to d2 and is safe now. And in fact, white is the one who can now start to create some counterplay. Play rook f5, still the best move in the position. Queen gets out of the way, and here bringing the rooks both onto the f file, trying to create more pressure against the f file. This is another takeaway, was definitely was getting hung up on the f file, trying to build pressure, missing cross-board tactics like queen c4. So yeah, something more to work on. Queen takes on c6. Knew this was coming, but couldn't defend against it, so had to give back this pawn. And here, e5, a mistake deemed by the computer. Felt natural to be able to try and remove the defender of the f2 pawn. I felt like if I could get to the f2 pawn, I felt like I was back on in the attack, but this is not correct. Here, computer's saying really we need to be building up the attack, getting the queen out of the ways of the rooks, so the rooks can do potential sacrifices if need be. Yeah, queen g4 as well, option. Queen e4, option. But yeah, these two strongest moves. Queen takes on e6 now. Opponent does have the immediate c4 now in this position, which is a very strong move. This is probably why e5 is so weakening, because now this pawn is undefended. But opponent doesn't see that. They go for this check first. King runs. Again, we're not going to pin ourselves like we did in round 7 of last tournament, although we did win, but we pinned ourselves with our rook. So not going for that again. King h8 just getting out of the way, and zeros all round. Rook takes on a7. Apparently a mistake because of queen e4, which did not see in the game here. Continue down this line of e4, which is a miss. Here, queen e4, apparently the strongest move. Here does reinforce the idea of this check and perhaps trying to infiltrate. Here, already some of the best moves, bishop c1, and then queen takes f5, next best move, which is surprising as well. But yeah, if we have gone bishop c1, Now just slow move h6. Apparently continues the best and only way to hold the advantage. So yeah, don't think we would have found any of this in the position. Still now just queen f5. Knight f4 perhaps, getting out of the way. And now sacrificing the rook. Rook takes on f4. E takes back. And then here queen takes f4. King's going to run to d1 perhaps. d1. Now we take on, give another check on f3. King going to c2. Another check though. f2. Might come to e1. There's a queen h1 check. Oop. Check. E2, only way to hold, and then we win back the bishop, perhaps. Queen h5 check even. So again, I need to go down an entire piece to win this and hold this advantage in this game. So yeah, just it beyond the pay grade at this point, but we're gonna keep working on it. Definitely gonna work through ideas here with coach as to why this is so strong, but we can see here just the ability to continue checking is super powerful. King e1 and the computer evaluation is just climbing. Back to h1, king e2 though. Queen f3 this time. King e1. f1's mate. d2 even. Either way we're taking. King's now only move. e1. Now we pick up the rook. Wow. Crazy. So yeah. This, I guess, is the huge difference between the sequence we went through with queen giving checks on h1 and then f3. King was hiding away on d2, whereas this sequence here, even though we give away material to start with, the ability to continually check the king eventually just finds these forks across the board. The queen's so powerful. So yeah, crazy, crazy stuff. Unfortunately here, yeah, back to what happened in the game. We went with e4, and now opponent finds clutch move c4. Advantage just keeps continuing to climb here for white, and their first and strongest decisive moment of the game, where white has finally got the advantage. Here, it needs to just hold down the fort with rook g8. There's this huge pressure. Not only does c4 pressure in the middle, but it's really the discovery from the bishop that is huge worry here. Definitely don't want to allow this bishop take and fork. Be absolutely devastating position. Here, apparently, rook dropping back is the strongest of these moves. Bishop takes now doesn't work, but they do have rook take. We have take back with the rook. Queen takes, and yeah, whoop, that way. Queen c8 or e8 check first. Now the rook drops back. Queen d7. And yeah, there's still these two pieces, and white's the one with the passes. So yeah, this continues on for advantage for white. Played rook g8 though, just trying to hold down the fort. And here, opponent, I felt like opponent was rushing in the game anyway. They still had 50 odd minutes on the clock, and I was already under 10 minutes at this point. And they went with what I think they believe was a forcing sequence, but I didn't think this worked, which it doesn't. Rook takes on g7 is a mistake because we can simply take. Rook takes g7. Opponent can give this check, but we can drop our rook back down to f8, defended by our queen. Here can give another check, but we take back. And after this check on e5, we can block our queen coming back Here, the endgame, even though we're down a pawn, we've got the rook for the knight, and I was totally happy to go into an endgame here. Initially didn't want to go for this, but now we can hide the king away. Did think about the initial slide the queen over, offering the trade again. But this isn't as strong as king h8. And now the advantage is squarely back in black's court, if we can only take advantage of it. Here, 95, best move. And now it does seem intuitive to find these moves, either rook g8 or rook e8. But again, here in this position on move 39, I am low on the clock, already down to 8 minutes on the clock here. So did feel very natural just to take this pawn with check, get the queens off the board, and I felt like at least this endgame was holdable, that I didn't think these pawns were going anywhere really, as long as I defend properly, which, see in a second if I do or don't. King e1 and rook b2, already a mistake here. Rook f5, put pressure on the knight, kick the knight out is the way to go. But we're going after these passed pawns, which seem very scary. But this allows for take. Computer here just wants c5, just pushing this pawn through. And then after takes, a c6 and just keep storming through. Now we have to sort of back up and then try and get behind the pawn this way. But yeah, opponent takes, we take back. And now this pawn is very strong. d6 played by our opponent, and here we're going to be very careful. Going to have to look in and work on these types of endgames as well, where the passed pawn is a runner, especially if we do have a rook. We need to be finding that it's the other way, checking the king, trying to get behind the pawn is the way to go, and defend from a distance, rather than where we go, which is an absolute blunder, rook b8. This just allows the pawn through. d7 on the board would have won the game for white. There's no stopping because now d7, rook can blockade for a second, but it's going to get kicked. By the fork and lost. So that's impossible to come behind the pawn. Here would have to be king g7, and now rook c6 defends the promoter. Here we would have to sacrifice the rook for the pawn, and then even though we've got two pawns, it's pawn versus knight, and yeah, white is the only one with winning chances in that endgame. The knight can give itself up for either of these pawns, and then the king can go win the other if needed. So yeah, got to spend some time on this here. Again, rook b8 played with only 5 minutes left on the clock. So yeah, can't be too harsh on yourself, but yeah, got to be, able to spend time on this. So either saving time in the future or working on these end games to make sure we're not blundering hard. Opponent though blunders hard. Yeah, bit of a mistake. We're still 40 minutes on the clock. Move 44. More 40, 45, nearly 50 minutes on the clock. Yeah, definitely could have spent more time calculating out this endgame, but perhaps wanted to keep pressure on my clock to try and force blunders, which they already did. They just needed to see that this d7 push was working. Here we attack the knight and kick it out. And here, with this fork, I didn't see really how to continue on here. The computer just says, just chuck the pawns, walk into losing the pawn with a check. Because then you can keep walking towards the center, king e5 here. Put pressure onto these pawns. Knight g3 now, and then go ahead and pick up either the passed pawn or now be able to come and defend. And black would be totally winning here. But yeah, also got to see this, that again, we can chuck pawns because king activity is potentially even more powerful than the pawn, because the king can be the blockator, the king can be the attacker, the king can be the kick out, the piece. So yeah, we've got to look at this activity too. h5 doesn't work. Again, again, was just trying to get this pawn rolling. Finally get the rook behind. Rook f8 though apparently is the way to go. Again, gonna have to really look into these rook endgames. King f2. Now we bring our king up, g6. Opponent plays king f3. We're trying to kick out the knight here and move towards the center with our king. So getting this king activity. Here I was only down to about 3 minutes left on the clock here. So again, I thought it's possible that black might be the one playing for a win here. If we could somehow defend, but I thought it was more practical to just go after these center pawns to be able to take this pawn with the rook and just blockade this pawn. I thought there's no way I'm going to lose. So yeah, practically speaking, I feel like this is the right call. Would have been absolutely devastated to lose from here. So yeah, winning mentality all the way to the end, perhaps, but yeah, definitely was at least now able to hold. King e5 now, giving up the final pawn, but being able to take back. And now king e2, kick out the knight retreats. Kick out the knight again, knight retreats. And we can see how this is going. Knight d2, back up, knight comes in. We allow the position to be repeated, and opponent offers the draw, as it's going to be threefold, and I think we're both happy to go away with a draw after this crazy up and down game. Some good takeaways from this game. Opening was super solid against not traditional setup, more of this hybrid setup from my opponent, but I got everything I wanted. Getting in the early c5 push, getting the bishops out, having the more active pieces, more pressure towards the center, castling early. Finding plans in the middle game, transferring the queen across to the king side was super critical. Being able to have the opportunity to sacrifice, although we didn't quite get there. At least we're getting this opportunity in this game. Just need to be able to calculate through to see that even if it's not a checkmate, that sacrifices can still be optimal. Transferring through, then being able to see these big long lateral queen moves. If we had found queen h4 and queen c4, yeah, the game would have been done and dusted, perhaps with a win for us. Then perhaps even being able to find that there's the rook takes on f2 sacrifice, and then being able to, the checks are quite powerful, and that the king can't hide, the king has to run, and then if the king has to run, there's opportunities to fork and loose pieces drop off, like the rook sitting on a6 loose piece, and we've got to see that if we're not going to fork it with queen c4, that perhaps we're able to in the future be able to fork it. But yeah, got to be able to see sacrifices in the position, which again is going to take us to the next level if we can find this. So back to the drawing board with calculation. Going to continue getting these calculation puzzles, sacrifices, finding forks, just all stuff we need to continue with. And then gonna have to start grinding some endgames because I'm getting there to endgames now. I was lucky to have rook versus knight in this endgame. So yeah, justified in giving up the two pieces for the rook, because we do get the 2 pawns at least. Perhaps 2 pieces for a rook isn't ideal, but with 2 pawns, perhaps that does work for us. So yeah, a lot to think about here, and again, even being able to sacrifice a pawn in the endgame for king activity. Yeah, lots of takeaways from this game. Still work on. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. Look forward to bringing you the next 6 rounds of this tournament. There is a public holiday in Melbourne next week and a weekend tournament, so there won't be a round next week. I look forward to bringing you round 2 in November. Thanks so much for supporting Lane Delight Chess.